Welcome, everyone. We're here at Black Hat, day 2 in 2019 of this fabulous conference and wonderful interview series. We're having so much fun. And I am so excited because one of my former coworkers at Tenable is here with us today. And I can't wait to talk about what you and I used to do in the past and what you're doing today. Mehul Revankar, he is the Senior Product Manager at SaltStack. Mehul, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show. And
Now,
it's a pleasure.
It's interesting. There's a bit of history. We've done podcasts together, but on the Tenable Network Security podcast, not the Security Weekly podcast, Mehul and I, and you've heard me say this on the show, he's actually here now. He's a real person, not in my imagination, that we work together very closely at Tenable. You would develop features inside the product. I would test them. I would give you feedback, and ultimately they would be released so that it's interesting, essentially, so people could test the configurations of their systems. So it wasn't surprising that you went over to SaltStack.
We spend a lot of time at Tenable finding vulnerabilities, configuration issues, compliance violations, and so on. And then, SaltStack seemed like a natural transition for my career to actually go out and now fix these things, right? Because when I used to talk to our customers, they said, you're doing such a great job, but now can you help me fix these things?
Yes.
And I almost didn't have a good answer to that. I mean, you could always provide like a report, a remediation report. I mean, these are the things you need to do, but somebody still had to go out and do these things for you, right? And manual scripts, bash files, like manually running commands and whatnot. And SaltStack has been doing it for maybe 8 or 9 years for their entire existence, for updating packages, installing packages, restarting services, and so on and so forth. Sort of super natural transition for me to go there. So super excited to be here.
It's so awesome, and I love the platform. And I think you hit already on one of the major differences between configuration auditing, right, and configuration management.
Right.
The management side you speak of that's in the SaltStack product allows you to change the configuration.
Right.
And today there are so many different configurations for so many. I mean, DevOps is just one example. You end up with so many configuration files. Now I got to go manually change all those. Like, no, like you're saying, we're going to tell you what's wrong, and then we're going to allow you to manage the fixing and remediation of that, right?
Right, and we'll also allow you so that what we have seen from our customers, there is a very strict boundary between your work. Like, the security teams, their responsibility is to actually just assess, not remediate. And the ops team comes in and says, don't touch my systems. I'm going to fix it. Right. So that's one challenge. And the second is, the infrastructure when you and I worked together was very limited. VMs pretty much.
More static. There wasn't.
You had your data center, and then you come out into this new modern infrastructure. It has gone to like network devices, IoT, containers, cloud, data centers, and so on. And to manage these configurations across these number of devices and services is an insanely complex problem. Remediation is actually a very hard problem. But the good thing is SaltStack has been doing it for such a long time. It's very natural and easy for us.
Right.
And the good thing is, like, the vendors who actually do the assessment, they feel comfortable handing us off the job. Here's my scan that came in. Here's the ServiceNow ticket. And now here's the thing you guys need to do. And then we are the action arm to actually go out and fix these things for you.
Yeah. And so what are the benefits to understanding your configuration and making changes? I think some people think it's just about compliance, and there is an aspect of compliance. I think some people think it probably breaks stuff more so than a lot of other things. So I don't want to go change my configuration just for security. I want to change it if there's functionality, right? But I think there's some real benefits that I've seen in my career to managing, controlling, in implementing configuration management that I think has been lost somewhat. I'm not sure. Or tied to compliance, where people are like, oh, compliance, I fall asleep, right?
So what I've seen is, configuration management is a very wide space, and there are a lot of vendors who claim to do configuration management. But from our perspective, configuration management also means providing content to go along with it. We see a lot of vendors come out and say, yeah, we do configuration management, but then go to this random GitHub repo and download this recipe or playbook or runbook and just apply it across your infrastructure, and everything should be just fine.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the engine that can reach out and push and pull configurations, and what you're saying is the content is the library of what configurations we can check for,
Exactly.
what's good, what's bad.
Right.
You're providing that to your customers with your development team.
Exactly.
It's not, a GitHub
It's
or
not
contribute
outsourced.
or
It's not.
yeah.
And and the good thing is, no one company is the same. Like everyone is going to have their own small tweaks and changes that need from the recommendations that come in from something like CIS or Disasteg.
Yeah.
And we also provide them that flexibility without writing a single line of code. They can just come into the product either through API or the UI, and like I want my CIS would recommend the password authentication try should be 5, and they could say we could set it to 3, and make it stricter or lax from there, and make it their own from there, right? Or if you don't, if you are at a point where you can start to use our library, and you can also bring in your own content to do these things in your environment and create your own custom policy, which is derived from an industry standard.
Right.
That's
what we always talked about at Tenable, and I always liked having a starting point,
exactly,
right, for you to work from, and then apply that to because your environment's going to be different pockets of your environment are going to have in areas, your DevOps and servers in the cloud and on-prem, like they all might have slightly different configurations.
And even the way you communicate with these different devices, like the way you communicate with databases, is completely different than how you communicate with operating systems or network devices, right? So it's very difficult.
Yeah, and you support more devices than a lot of other folks in terms of it's not just the operating system or the application, but it's also databases, routers, switches, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so SaltStack, the company itself, is built on the open source platform Salt, which is a Python-based framework. And the unique thing about us is we take a YAML file as input, right, and as directions on what we need to do. And so we can be agent-based, agentless, API-based, and so on and so forth. And as long as you can describe what your requirement is for whatever compliance or configuration management that you want to do for databases, network devices, containers, operating systems, hypervisors, it doesn't really matter because our engine can consume that and take the action based on it.
That's awesome. And I mean, that's a feat of engineering to have that much flexibility, right, to support that many different platforms without changing a whole bunch of code.
Exactly, and we've been at it for maybe 7 or 8 years. We have had millions of downloads of the Salt Open tool that we have, thousands of contributors to our open source engine. So it gets better every day, and things that the Salt community takes for granted, like package management, like installing packages, updating packages, is pretty robust in our infrastructure, and we can do this across like network devices. So installing or updating firmwares for network devices is extremely complex thing, like super complex. In the because you cannot go from like firmware version 1 to 5 directly. You have to go from version 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, right? And that requires a lot of automation and orchestration to get through. And we've had a lot of customers who we have said 14 man years by just automating and orchestrating the whole thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that the real crux of the issue here is that my famous quote, or maybe not so famous, but my quote is misconfiguration leads to compromise. Right? And I think that we spend a lot of time focusing on, do we have encryption? Do we have patches installed? And, do we have strong authentication? And those things are important, but a misconfiguration in really anything that we've talked about in terms of infrastructure applications can give an attacker an opportunity to compromise that system. In fact, I loved configuration exposures because I didn't rely on a missing patch or even a credential, just that configuration that goes, well, I don't need credentials. I don't need an exploit. Really, because you misconfigured it, I can just access it with nothing, without credentials. I mean,
some of the major breaches that we have seen have come because of S3 misconfiguration. Like Amazon S3, you can just go in, download all the data, has all the sensitive data in there. No one had to ever run a scan or do something on it. Just poke around and you find a weak configuration, and you are with all the data you're trying so hard to protect. And it's all there.
Well, it's interesting how the misconfiguration leads to exposures, right? And in one of our own instances we experienced, we pushed up our Docker containers and accidentally left the Docker API exposed to the internet.
Oh, wow.
So you fix that, as you know, right, with a configuration change. So because there was no checks and balances on that configuration, that can lead to getting owned very, very quickly. right? Thankfully, we found it fast, but it's configuration in auditing and managing your configuration that's going to prevent those things from happening.
Right. I mean, there are scripts that are actually running around the clock looking for these things, like in GitHub, credentials in GitHub, and like, as soon as they find it, like within minutes, your AWS test, and you start to see Bitcoin mining going, like, right away.
But that's a great, I think, endorsement for the platform you described, because while the attackers are looking for it fast and furious, you're also doing the same thing, right? When I noticed a configuration change that exposes a Docker container, right, it's SaltStack that's telling me, hey, you did that, go fix it, and hopefully I can go fix it before an attacker gets it, right?
Before an attacker gets in. And, we have some really good modules which we call beacons and reactors, so that you can set up so that you can monitor these things.
Right. And you can automate it. I can say if Docker is exposed to the internet, like change that configuration and then send someone an alert, so I can remediate automatically.
Yeah, so we have our reactor module in Salt, which essentially allows you to define conditions. So if you see these things happen, like if you see telnet running ever, just go and fix it.
Right.
And, we'll go ahead and fix it. Like, ever. Like if we see a patch with a critical vulnerability, just patch it. If you want to, you can do it. I mean, our framework itself is super.
It's cliche to say self-healing, but that's really kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, there are some organizations which are mature enough to do that level of change. Some require more hand-holding than others, but yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can do it with SaltStack.
Awesome. Now, you also have an announcement that you've made here at Black Hat that you're going to be supporting some patching. It's interesting, as I talked with you about this, I said, really, a missing patch is more just like a configuration, right? It is really an extension of a misconfiguration of the system.
It's an extension of the configuration management use case. Configuration management is talking about having the right patch levels and so on and so forth. So one thing, this is the first time we're publicly announcing on a show, Security Weekly, that we're also introducing.
Heard it here first.
Yep, it's right here first. Is we're introducing our vulnerability remediation module for SaltStack SecOps that's coming out in September. And we'll be talking about it more in detail. I think we have an interview later on.
Yeah. But how happy are you now that you get to help people change their configuration and automatically remediate, and now extend that same capability to patching?
For patching,
is that the goal?
That's the goal. And this essentially allows us to now become the action arm to fix things. A lot of company talks about risk and vulnerabilities and so on, but they don't actually help you remediate things.
Yeah.
And now we can actually come in and remediate things for you. And remediation, by the way, is very hard. Across a wide variety of systems, is very hard.
Like, raise your hand if you ever broke anything, changing a configuration or applying a patch, right? Like, I've made some big mistakes there.
And we have
15,000 people without email.
But from our perspective, we have snapshotting capabilities. We have our unique engine where you can segregate systems into various environments like test, production, UAT before start to roll out all these patches.
I agree. Especially in DevOps, it's a lot easier today because of the containerization and ephemeral. You can spin it up, make sure it tests well and passes all the tests. If it does, spin it down, move on to the next.
Move on to the next level, and we facilitate all of that. And we take when we look at I usually look at the vulnerability management use case, a lot of drop off happens between the sec and ops handoff. They'll scan the systems, they'll find maybe 100,000 vulnerabilities. They'll export it an Excel sheet and then lob it over to the ops guy. Hey, go fix it. And the ops guy is not figuring out, what do I fix here?
Right.
And
they've got a management tool for this and a management tool for that.
They don't talk to each other.
This patching, and then I got third-party apps, and maybe it includes it, maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't support Linux. Maybe it does. Maybe then the configurations are totally different. So
exactly.
Now they can consolidate all that on one platform.
Consolidate all of it in a single platform, and use SaltStack to actually go ahead and fix things for you, which is very powerful in some sense. Our customers look at it. You made it so easy that it's scary, because you've made it. How did you make it work so fast? And that's credit to our underlying platform at SaltStack. We've spent a lot of time, and a lot of people have contributed to what we are here. And it's super exciting to actually build products that customers want and use and want to pay for.
Awesome. We've talked on the show in the past about the differences between free and commercial, so I encourage our audience to go check it out.
Yep.
If you haven't, free version's great to get started with. I also encourage get a demo of the commercial version, because if you're working for an enterprise and don't have something like this, it's definitely something you have to look into.
Yeah, I mean, go try out. We are, open source is obviously free, and our betas are starting to roll out for SaltStack Enterprise 6.1 in the next few weeks. So sign up for beta, try it out as much time as you want. We'll give you all the licenses that you need, and then, we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Mehul, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.